It is the final day of campaigning in France for Sunday's presidential election. Polls suggest the race is tightening, with far-right candidate Marine Le Pen becoming an increasing threat to President Emmanuel Macron's chances of re-election. Well, the U.S. has had its own share of far-right candidates who often rise to power on the heels of a more liberal sitting president. In 2016, reality star turned politician Donald Trump was elected to the highest office in the land. His unprecedented win emboldened many far-right politicians around the world. Similar to Le Pen, Trump ran on a platform of making America great again, which meant building a wall in Mexico to keep Mexican migrants out and pulling the U.S. out of international organizations like the UNHCR. Marine Le Pen is also running on a similar platform, swearing to remove France from NATO and the U.S. sphere of influence. She also claims that multiculturalism has failed and that French society needs to be de-Islamized. She is now seen as the clear favorite to challenge Macron for the presidency after Sunday's first round, if she does make it through to the runoff. Opinion polls suggest for the first time that a Le Pen victory is within the margin of error.
I am very modest about the elections. The French will vote and we will obviously submit to their vote. So I think, of course, not only will I be in the second round, but I can win this presidential election. But it is the French who decide, and they will decide on Sunday evening.
Je me considère toujours comme un...
I always consider that I have to convince people. This is how I perceive the last 5 years. Nothing is guaranteed in a way, but for the rest, fear etc., no. In the first round of elections everyone presents their plan, with rallies where we stir up the crowd, which I have done in a few rare and insufficient, in my opinion, occasions, last Saturday and earlier this week in Brittany. Then we need to exchange directly in front of our fellow citizens, or through the media. People choose the project that they feel close to in the first round. The time of debate and of confrontation of projects is the second round.
Confrontation projet à projet, c'est le deuxième tour.
Well, to give his analysis on understanding France's far-right, Arise correspondent Don Warren came back to give his analysis.
It's a very significant moment because France has always traditionally been left, centre-left. Macron was almost seen as a breath of fresh air in the last election in 2017 because he had no track record. He was new. It was a new party, and it was seen as France was dipping their toe to the other side of the spectrum. And basically, we've seen 5 years where he's actually not had the easiest of presidencies. He actually hasn't achieved that much on a global and local scale. Now, it was always thought that Le Pen would be seen as a favourite for a runoff, but also from candidates from the centre-left side, where France would go back to politics where they're traditionally comfortable with. But it's everything in it, as far as if this was a Hollywood movie, the script was going to plan as far as Macron was seeing up to a month ago. His handling of the Ukraine conflict was certainly seeing him stable. And then in the last couple of weeks, and also the last week and the last few days, we've seen this surge from Marine Le Pen, which not many people predicted the surge. They thought it would be like last time, where we would be seeing that Macron would be a clear winner in the runoff, with Le Pen a distant second. And as you mentioned, that within the era of victory, so within the area of error, margin error, we could see a Le Pen victory, which France, the fact is Le Pen has gone more to the centre-right in the last 5 years. She has re-established herself. She has said that Frexit, which would be the equivalent of France leaving the EU, wouldn't necessarily be guaranteed, but it's almost leaving in stealth through the back door by certain policies that she would bring in. So she has gone more centre-right. So because there's been other candidates now that have taken the far right mantle to the extreme. So she has tried to sort of meet and make a compromise. That may have made a major difference. And Sunday will certainly be very interesting because we're almost seeing 1% between them now, which again, unheard of.
Well, let me ask you, Dan. Well, how much does Donald Trump's victory in 2016 have to do with the rise of the right, particularly in France?
Well, very interesting, very good question there, because Donald Trump was seen as the voice of many Americans that felt they didn't have a voice, that felt that the mainstream media, that found that Hollywood and other politicians were just playing it safe in the center. And basically, he proved that, he was seen as the joke candidate. People did not think he would win. And he won. And according to the bookies, the London bookmakers, he is favourite to win in 2024, despite he hasn't actually officially announced he would run again. And the fact is that since Donald Trump's election, we've seen in the UK, Boris Johnson, who is seen as a right candidate, he was elected in 2019 with a landslide victory that the media didn't predict. So it does give people of France who are on the right side of politics, and by that I obviously mean right as in the movement. I'm not personally condoning it's the right confirming that it's the right side, so to speak. They feel that they've actually got a voice. It can be done. And we are seeing, for example, media, the mainstream media talking about how markets are reacting to the risk of a Le Pen victory. That language is actually probably going to help them because, yes, it should be to the possibility of a Le Pen victory, but they're already making it sound like danger in this scaremongering. And actually, research in previous elections has proved when that type of language is used, it just solidifies the people on the right to go out and vote. So it will be a case if as we go with the polls, and this is exactly what happened with Donald Trump when he won, he got his fan base out. They went out and they voted, whereas a lot of people that were Hillary Clinton supporters thought it was a done deal. This could happen if we see a runoff between Macron and Le Pen. Basically, Le Pen's voters will likely come out in full force, and then it's just a case of whether the people on the left and centre left will actually get out and vote, or whether they believe that it's a done deal. There's no way France would actually have the possibility of a right to far right president. But as we've seen in the last few years in Western politics, anything can happen.
Dan, I hope we can do this one in a minute. Well, Europe has somewhat been the theater for immigration issues. And how much is that going to be an influence when people go out to vote on Sunday? And then also, what about issues emerging from Ukraine and Russia? Will that also have an influence on the voting patterns?
Well, it's interesting because what a incumbent president that it literally faces an election when there is some form of war crisis, what they can at least expect is when it comes to the polls that a crisis would give them the boost. That hasn't happened. So it does seem that the French certainly aren't happy with Macron's handling 1 month on. At first, when the invasion first took place, the opinion polls suggested, yes, France were happy, but he's still talking about we must keep dialogue open with President Putin. The fact is, it is quite clear that President Putin will not negotiate. So it's hardline sanctions. I think that what seems to be, according to research studies, is what the French want to see. With regards to immigration, I think Le Pen certainly wants to limit the number of sort of freedom of movement, something the EU won't be open to unless you actually physically leave the EU. That's what happened with Brexit negotiations in the UK. But I think that the problem is that immigration is always seen as a tool for the centre-right and far-right as one way of saying we can do this to protect our country. They start accusing actions of terrorism and not on the humanitarian side. So unfortunately, it will be likely, if we get the runoff that we expect between those two candidates, that immigration is going to be played a lot as a political football over the next 2 weeks.